Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I am Debashis Basu. On 23rd April evening, Franklin Templeton, a very large and a very reputed mutual fund, suddenly announced something very, very shocking. It said that it would shutter about 6 of its debt mutual funds all of a sudden. These funds have about 27,000 crore of investors' assets. What is the meaning of shutting down the funds? It would mean that Franklin would neither accept any new subscriptions now, nor would it allow anyone to exit on their own. It will start liquidating the assets in the fund as and when it can. Not all of its assets are liquid and not all of them fetch a fair value. But as and when it liquidates its assets, it will be able to return the money which the investors had put into the fund. How much money would that be? We don't know. How much of the 27,000 crore is a loss? We will eventually know, but right now we have no idea. Even the fund company has no idea. Now, this sent shockwaves across the mutual fund industry, and in fact, investors in general, whether at all they invest in debt funds or not, are asking whether it is something that's going to affect them, affect the system, affect banks, affect others, the borrowers, and so on. It's been a hot topic of discussion. According to me, this particular scandal raises 5 very, very important questions. First of all, what went wrong? What was happening inside the Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund? Is there a systemic flaw here, or is it just an isolated incident, as some fund experts say? Is there a role for regulators here to try to fix something like this, or just let market forces be? Can this happen again? And most importantly, for people like you and me, what would we do? What should we be doing to avoid such issues, such scandals? Now, the first question, what went wrong? When the coronavirus struck, Franklin faced redemptions. A lot of money people started pulling out money from the funds. Now, the Franklin would be able to pay back only if it can liquidate its investments or if there is more money coming into the fund. Now, not many people were investing at that time. The outflows are more, which means there was a gap. And this gap could be met by selling the assets and returning the money. But many of these schemes have invested in assets, invested in debt paper, invested with companies to sort of lend them. And these are not liquid at all. Franklin cannot sell them suddenly and return the money, which means there is a gap between what the investors ask of them and the cash that Franklin has. Now, in situations like these, the mutual funds are temporarily allowed to borrow up to 20% of the assets. Now, that level was also hit. So Franklin had no choice but to sort of stop the operations and say, well, we can't run this, and we are going to return the money as and when we can liquidate the assets. So this is what has happened. Now, is there a systemic flaw here? If you ask everybody else, they'll say no. If you ask me, I would say yes, there is a major systemic flaw. Let me take you back to what has been happening in the mutual fund industry for the last 18 months or maybe 24 months or so. The mutual fund ecosystem, if you remember or if you know, comprises fund managers, the distributors, of course, fund companies, fund managers, distributors, advisors, and of course, the regulator who's overseeing all of this. The popular narrative of most people is that, and that is broadcast by the media, is that the problem is mainly external. Havoc wrought by COVID-19 and partly internal, which is extra risk taken by Templeton. So suddenly they are in trouble. I'm sure fund company doesn't even accept the second explanation, which is that they have taken extra risks. But I argue that the problem is both with the fund industry and the product categories. So it's a systemic flaw. It's something which is deeply embedded in the fund industry. The fixed income division of not just Franklin, but many other mutual funds, very large, well-known mutual funds, have been involved in all sorts of financial scandals over the past 18 months. Infrastructure leasing in financial services, which imploded, ZSL, where there was a major problem in repayment, Diwan Housing Finances, which has gone bust, and Yes Bank, which had to be rescued. Otherwise, there would be a huge systemic issue. In all of these cases, mutual funds were lenders. They were not just investors, they were really lenders. Some time ago, Franklin also wrote off 100% of its investments in Vodafone paper. It had the highest exposure to this telecom company at more than 2,000 crore out of a total of 4,500 crore. It was that out there taking risks. I had first exposed in Moneylife that how Vadhavan Global Capital, the personal holding company of the DHFL promoters, raised 2,000 crore through zero coupon bonds from Aditya Birla Mutual Fund and of course Franklin. Franklin had also lent money to Rana Kapoor's holding company Yes Capital, which had more than 3% stake, Yes Bank stake, again through a zero coupon bond. In all these cases, the mutual funds acted as reckless lenders and not as prudent investors. Clearly, how debt funds are being run is a systemic issue. It's not an isolated case. And since they have been involved in all of these major scandals over the last 18 months. Point number 3. Is there a role for the regulator? Yes, very much. It can do two things. One, it needs to fix accountability of credit rating companies and fund companies by enforcing clauses that claw back the fees in all cases that blow up. Funds abdicate their responsibility today to raters, that is, credit rating companies, who in turn have no accountability to fund companies. This is absolutely perverse, but this is how the system is going on. Credit rating companies must be made accountable for ratings that blow up without a warning. The second thing SEBI can do is, if Franklin is asked to put back into the fund the fees it has extracted from the 6 schemes from the beginning, then it is just going to take a very close look at how its debt mutual funds are being run, and it will certainly straighten up. And next time it's going to take much less risk and not going to blow up your money. Now, another big problem that regulator needs to take a look at is the number of types of the debt mutual funds there are. In equity, there are 10 categories. In debt, there are 16. We simply don't need so many. Several of these, such as credit risk funds and long-term debt funds, should not be sold to retail investors at all, but only to corporates, because the risks in these are very, very high. Question number 4. Can this happen again? Of course it can happen again, because all of these things that I mentioned just before are not going to happen. The regulator has never touched the heart of the problem, which is the fund industry's income is a percentage of funds it collects. This is an incentive for them. The more assets they gather, the larger the fund, the greater is their income and greater is the salary and bonuses that they share. So there is no incentive to focus their minds on the fiduciary role, the role as a trustee of other people's money that belongs to people like you and me. If their fees were somehow linked to returns and or certain outcomes, which is bad outcomes, there would be a significant change in their behavior. But SEBI is not even thinking of it as of now. And finally, the last question, what should investors do to avoid such accidents or such scandals and not get locked up in the way the investors in Franklin Templeton have got? Now, take a look at some of the names of the 6 funds. I'll just read out some of them to you. Low duration fund, dynamic accrual fund, credit risk fund, short-term income fund, ultra short bond fund, and income opportunities fund. Now, just ask yourself, how many of you even know what these funds mean, and what is the mandate and where they invest and so on? I can bet even finance professionals will not be able to tell the details about where these funds go and invest. Debt investments is the domain of very, very specialized and a small group of professionals. Many investors I know don't even understand the average investor don't even understand the fact that debt schemes are mislabeled as fixed income schemes, which give investors the false sense of security that there's something like bank FD, where the capital is protected. In reality, many debt schemes have very, very huge hidden risks. The principle to remember for you as an investor is very, very simple. Capital protection is paramount when you're looking at debt investment. Take your chances in equity, but never take chances in debt. So say no to all of these categories which you do not understand, which is fixed maturity plans, credit risk, dynamic debt, long-term debt, and so on. So what do you really need from all of these 16 types of funds that SEBI has allowed fund companies to dump on you? You just need 2 or 3 types. You need liquid schemes as a substitute for a savings account to park your money, and maybe short-term debt schemes, or rather low duration schemes. Of course, there is one more step. It's not enough for me to say that look at liquid schemes and look at only short-term debt funds. Which ones are these? Now, that is a dynamic and a changing situation. You need to figure out still which liquid fund and which short-term scheme. This is impossible for the average investor to do very, very quickly. After all, one of the 6 funds of Franklin was a liquid fund. And IDBI mutual fund had put risky investments even in liquid funds, right? So that leads to the second option, or the second step in this whole process of what you should be doing, which is look for a good advisor, an advisor you can trust. That again begs a lot of other questions. Where do you find them? How do you trust them? And so on and so forth. Now, all I can say is that, as you can see, even my bare bones solution is not so simple. And that's how hard SEBI and the fund ecosystem has made it all for you. Thanks for watching.